Is the 619 a finisher? Is it a signature? Is it a lovemaking position with a finger in your belly button? The apron bump is here to solve this, folks. What's up, everybody? My name's Kyle, also known as the hardest part of the ring. Welcome to the Apron Bump YouTube channel. I have a little question for you guys today, which I already asked, and it's in the title, so you understand why we're here to discuss if Rey Mysterio's 619 is truly a finisher. And this might seem like a random question, might seem like a silly question, but this was prompted by a recent video that I watched by the SCW, the Stash Club Wrestling channel. Shout out to them, by the way. Awesome channel. I love their videos. They do a lot of wrestling quizzes. They do a podcast, a weekly podcast. Just a couple of dudes that have fun talking about wrestling, doing quizzes on wrestling. So I strongly suggest you go check those guys out. However, a few panties were ruffled here in the past few days related to a recent video that they did. It was a quiz where both John and Dante of SCW had to guess the wrestler by the finisher name. So they were given a finisher name and they had to guess who the wrestler is that does this finisher. Well, the West Coast Pop came up. Clearly, everybody knows this is Rey Mysterio's move. However, they would then go on to basically say like, oh, I guess this isn't a list of finishers, it's a list of signatures too, in response to the West Coast Pop, insinuating that the West Coast Pop is not Rey Mysterio's finisher and that the 619 is. They even say that the 619 is his main finisher. Now they have since backtracked and everybody's kind of come to the agreement that the West Coast Pop is one of Rey Mysterio's finisher. By the way, you can have multiple finishers, and that's another thing that we've all come together and agreed on. And I will say that I also was able to compromise and come to the conclusion that, yeah, the 619 is a finisher, the West Coast Pop is a finisher, the Frog Splash is a finisher. Rey Mysterio has several finishers. And admittedly, I've kind of gone back and forth on it, because at first I was like, yeah, clearly it's a signature. But then you can argue, yeah, man, maybe it's just half of the finisher. Maybe it's a part of the finisher. Maybe it's just another finisher. I've kind of gone back and forth on it. However, when you look deeper into it, it's pretty clear that the 619 is not a finisher. Now, I responded to that video basically saying that the 619 is actually a signature and the West Coast Pop is more of a finisher because that's what finishes the match. The West Coast Pop, or dropping the dime, or the Frog Splash, or any of his other various springboard moves that he does following the 619, because he has never, Rey Mysterio has never finished a match after the 619. Never. Not once. He has never hit the 619 and then just walked over and pinned the guy. Now, if he has, feel free to drop a comment. Maybe I'm unaware. So if he never finishes the match with the move, it's not the finisher. It should be that simple. But people disagree with this. Now, before we get into this whole debate, I think it's very important that we establish what is a signature move and what is a finishing move. And it's very important that we make it clear that this terminology, it's kind of entered the zeitgeist of the wrestling community. People kind of just use it whenever. But ultimately, these terms and the differentiation between these two words, signature and finisher, it was 100% derived from the WWE games. The WWE SmackDown games, SmackDown versus Raw, WWE 2K, and all the iterations of that video game. Each wrestler has a signature and a finisher. That is because Michael Cole isn't calling out signatures and finishers. Nobody in wrestling is calling a match and differentiating what's a signature and a finisher. I mean, each wrestler just has their big moves that could or could not win a match. So let's make that clear. This is 100% a video game derived terminology. Now, with that in mind, with that logic, you could really just make this a cut and dry case by just looking at the video games, which is as current as the most recent game as of this recording, WWE 2K22. His signature move is the 619, which sets up his finisher, which could either be the frog splash or the springboard frog splash. Past couple 2K games, it's been the same thing. The signature has been the 619, and it's been a variety of different finishers, ranging from frog splashes to top rope ranas of the sort, which typically, even in real life, would typically be the finish of a Rey Mysterio match if you were to hit his finisher to hit it. And then even back to the SmackDown vs. Raw days when he was first introduced to the series, his finisher was the 619. However, it's very important to distinguish this fact. They didn't have the mechanic to stand on the apron and perform springboard moves until very later on. So the 619 finisher, even though it was called the 619, and it was technically his finisher in the game, it was one singular animation of putting him on the ropes, the 619, and then the springboard West Coast pop or splash or whatever it was. It was all one animation. It wasn't the swinging tiger feint kick, which is what a 619 is. That was never a standalone finisher. It's never been a standalone finisher in any wrestling game ever. Never. Not once. So considering the fact that signature and finisher, like this whole segmentation of those two things, this all comes from the WWE games. Right there, I mean, that proves that the 619 isn't a finisher. But that aside, because as I mentioned, signature and finisher have kind of entered just the lexicon of vocabulary that we hear in the internet wrestling community and then just wrestling fans in general. Now the question is, in real life, just ignoring the video games, because we already proved that, in real life, would you consider the 619 Rey Mysterio's finisher? Now, I think we start this by defining, again, what's a signature and what's a finisher. Finisher. You know what, let's Google finisher. I'm curious as to like what Merriam-Webster's like definition of finisher is. An animal that has been fattened, ready for slaughter. Well, shit, maybe the 619 is a finisher. No, it's the first definition, of course. A person or thing that finishes something. So in the context of wrestling, we're talking about finishing a wrestling match. Can we agree on that? Again, the 619, the swinging kick through the ropes, has not once finished a wrestling match. It's the follow-up. It's the springboard splash. It's the frog splash. It's the dragon rana. It's the seated senton. It's the dropping the dime. Whatever move that Rey feels like using in the moment is what finishes the match. It's the last move. The finisher is the last move. Can we agree on that? I feel like that's pretty cut and dry, right? It finishes it. How many times do I gotta say it? The finisher finishes the match. The 619 does not finish the match. Therefore, 619, not a finisher. But, and this causes a ruckus in some people's britches. This causes a lot of nipples to become flaccid. This causes a lot of veins to get popped out of people's heads. When I say that, the 619 is not a finisher. But here, I'm not diminishing the value of the 619. It's an iconic move. It's something that Rey Mysterio is known for. It's almost like it's his signature. Now, we looked up the definition of finisher. Let's look up the definition of signature. In relation to the topic at hand, a signature is something such as a tune, style, or logo that serves to set apart or identify. So something that sets you apart, something that makes you stand out from the pack, something that is unique to you. Boy howdy, this sounds like the 619 to me. Yeah, I mean, you got fucking Cesaro doing the Swiss 19. You got people, the Tiger Feint kick, I'm sure, was probably a move before Rey Mysterio did it, but in wrestling culture today, that move belongs to Rey Mysterio. It's his move. He made it famous, but it doesn't finish matches. It's special. It's something that people associate Rey Mysterio to. It's on his pants. It's in his theme song. People chant it. It's the move that people get most excited about to see from Rey Mysterio. But this aligns with what the definition of the signature is. Signature isn't a lesser move than the finisher. That's probably what a lot of people think. People probably think, oh, finisher, signature. The finisher is the big move. The signature is the not so big move. That's not what the case is. The signature is the move that sets up the finisher. This is what the 619 is. I think, is this all making sense to you guys? Like, some people really, really disagree with me. Some people. And I'm telling you, man, it's pretty easy when you break it down like this. When you break down what a finisher is, the definition of that. When you break down what a signature is, the definition of that. You tie it to Rey Mysterio. The 619 is a signature move. Doesn't finish matches, so it's not a finisher. And hell, we're only talking about his WWE stint. We're not even touching ECW, WCW, his Lucha Libre experience before he came to WWE. He didn't really start doing the 619 until he came to WWE, at least not as a big-time move that would lead to the end of matches. He was doing, his finisher is basically a Hurricane Rana, just various versions of it. You know, some top rope Ranas, springboard Ranas. Hell, even to this day, he'll throw out just a head scissors and then wrap the guy up. Let's be real, most of the time Rey Mysterio wins with like silly roll-ups anyways. But before he even came to WWE, he kind of established that West Coast pop-ish type of move as his finisher. So you can't even be like, oh, well, the 619 is the oldest one. No, it's not, because he didn't start doing that until much later in his career. I mean, it's a unique scenario for sure, because people hear signature and finisher, like I said, and they're like, oh, the signature is not the main move. But in this case, it is. It just doesn't finish the matches. I can't even really think of another example that parallels this. I mean, the closest I could think of is maybe like a Goldberg, because he has the spear and then the jackhammer. But I would argue that Goldberg is more associated to the spear than the jackhammer. Look, that's my opinion. You could argue either way. But he never wins with the spear. He always wins with the jackhammer. It's kind of the same thing. Not really the same thing. Because the 619 is a situation where it puts you on the apron and then you have to get in the ring. Rey Mysterio could hit the 619 and just get in the ring and pin him. Like, that would be a perfectly fine scenario. Now, of course, he's Rey Mysterio, so he's going to add some flair to it. But ultimately, that flair is what finishes the match. It's the finisher. You walk up to anybody in the street, yeah, people are going to associate Rey with the 619 more than the West Coast Pop or the springboard leg drop or the frog splash or whatever it is. Yeah, of course they are. That doesn't mean it's a finisher. In fact, I think that solidifies the argument that it's a signature, because it's a signature. It's something that identifies with Rey Mysterio. It's something that is different about Rey than anybody else, because that's nobody else's big time move. It's only Rey's, which makes it a signature. I feel like this is pretty simple, right? I mean, booyaka, right? I love Rey Mysterio. I love the 619. I love 69, but I mean, even the 69 isn't really a finisher. I mean, who finishes with a 69? Maybe you do. Leave a comment below if you do. Anyways, also like the video, subscribe, give daddy a kiss on the way out, and check out my podcast, the Apron Bump Podcast. Cover a lot of retro stuff, cover a lot of old school Rey Mysterio where he's not doing the 619. But go check that out if you wish, and have a blessed day.